For 32, and notice I'm going to skip 31. And the reason is we could only get 21 questions on the exam, not 22. So one like this was removed. So it's a long one to go through. I'll just let you know, don't worry. Spend your time on the other ones. Those will be helpful for the exam. Um, I mean, some of these concepts are in there, but they're covered in other questions. That will save you some time. Okay, so for 32, we were given this graph, and it can be written as either a sine or a cosine. And notice it doesn't start, usually this starts like here for the cosine, and this would start at 0 for the sine. So they're going to ask us actually to do both, express it as a sine and a cosine. So we'll start off with the sine function first. And they also want you to do it in a way that has the smallest possible horizontal shift. So what we see here, a couple different things. So I guess sine function, right, is going to be A, which stands for amplitude, times the sine. We've got to kind of figure out what the period is going to be. B times x, and then there's a shift, right? So B, actually, if we do it this way, because then it would distribute through, and then there's a shift, so that goes inside here, and then a vertical shift plus or minus goes out here, and usually we call that D. This would say plus or minus C, or we make C negative, right? So first of all, the amplitude, since this goes from -2 to +2, right? Here's the top to the bottom. Amplitude is from the top to the bottom, half of that. So 2 minus 2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So it's half the wave. So we see that the amplitude for this one is going to be equal to 2. And it doesn't matter whether it's sine or cosine. That's going to remain the same. Same thing with period. Period, we need to get what's the distance from where it starts to repeat. We could go from here to here. If we go from here, we just get off there. Sort of a clear one is like from the top to the top. This is going to give us 1 period. So what's that distance? It's from here to here is 3 pi over 2. Period. And then from this point to here, even though it's negative, it's 5 pi over 2 from here to 0. So that's the distance. You could subtract a negative, however you want to do it. We're going to add it 5 pi over 2. When we add these two together, they have a common denominator already. So that stays 2. We don't add the 2 to 2 and get 4. No, these are fractions, common denominator of 2. But then we do take 3 plus 5. We get 8 pi. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So our period is 4 pi. Remember, that's going to be equal to 2 pi over b. Multiply both sides by b, and then divide by pi over 4. We need to solve for b. This is the way I remember it. So multiply by b. That cancels with that. Multiply this side times b. So we have b times 4 pi. Divide by 4 pi. And what you get is that b, 2 pi divided by 4 pi. Pi's cancel out. That's 1. 2 divided by 4 gives us 1/2. Okay, so we have our A, we have our B. There is no vertical shift, right? Because it goes from -2 to 2. So we could say D is going to be 0, no vertical shift. But there is a shift here. We're supposed to be at 0, but it's at pi over 2. it was moved to the right, which is in the positive direction, which means we need to subtract pi over 2 because that's in the opposite direction. So let's see if we can put all this together. It should be 2 sine of 1/2 sorry here, I'm just trying to think through this. Okay, yeah, yeah, and sorry, uh, and then in here we're going to have x minus pi over 2. Okay. Now another way to write this, we can distribute this 1/2, and then we'd have 1/2 x minus pi over 4. So that's another way we could write it too, but this is fine. Now we don't have to do too much more work. The cosine is really all going to be the same as far as we're talking. I mean, the period's going to be the same, amplitude is going to be the same. The only difference with cosine is that this is where cosine's supposed to start. So with cosine, we were shifted in the negative direction by pi over 2. So it'll change us with cosine. We have a plus pi over 2. So we could write this as, well, they use g of x, right? But it equals, it's going to be 2. We just switch over. We're going to use the cosine. Notice how it's almost identical. The period means that b has to be 1/2. But this time we have x plus pi over 2 because it's shifted to the left. Go up a little bit. Yeah, that's okay. So there's the sine, there's the cosine, and again, be able to take those values off of the graph. So given a graph, be able to come up with this. Also watch if, had this been shifted up by 1, we would have a plus 1. Had it been shifted vertically down 1, then we would have had a subtract 1 at the end. So that's really the only thing we didn't have is a horizontal shift. Sorry, we had a horizontal shift, we didn't have a vertical shift. Okay, so this is for the A part here. This is for the B part here. Let's try that again. A, B. And then that's what they said is they wanted the smallest possible shift. And what all they're talking about here is we could have used like this side. Oops, I have one problem. One thing I forgot. This is a cosine, but cosine is supposed to start at the top. And same thing with a sine. Sine is going okay, it goes up this way. We could have looked at this as a cosine being shifted this way by pi over 3 and move this one back. Since I chose this one, I'm down at -2. What I have to do here as well is put a negative, right? Because I need to, the standard cosine would have starts high and then goes low. So if I'm going to start low, I need to say it's been reflected. Okay. So I could do it that way. That's why my answer is different from their answer. What they did is they used this one, which is pi over 3, and they said, okay, it's been shifted this way for cosine, which, okay, then we start at the top, and that's correct. This way works just fine. Let's see if they say, note that the shifts are multiple correct ways to answer each question, depending on what horizontal shifts you use to express that. So depending upon what we want to use here. In this case, we are looking for the expressions involving the smallest possible horizontal shift of this and this to the right. Okay, I didn't read the instructions clear. They wanted it to the right. So if we're going to shift it to the right, if that's the assumption that it's been shifted to the right, then that's why they come up with the function positive 2 cosine 1/2 x minus 3 pi over 2. So they did a shift to the right. I just saw they wanted the smallest shift. I said, okay, I can do that. Let's shift it to the left just a little bit. But then it's cosine starting at the bottom instead of starting at the top. So then I need this extra little negative up here. Okay. The thing with this question, just understand how to take a graph and that there are multiple ways to come up with these functions depending upon the horizontal shift.